Please join me in welcoming Secretary Nick Tennyson.
Good evening. I noticed, as a matter of fact, when we had the colors presented, one of the gentlemen wore dolphins, so he's a, am I speaking close enough to the mic, actually? Submariner, wearing dolphins on his shirt, and I was on a surface ship, and the submariners are always kind of mean, because they said there are two kinds of ships, there are submarines and targets. And that was the kind of attitude I had to deal with as a surface guy. I am proud to be here tonight. I'm proud of the North Carolina Department of Transportation. Candidly, the thought of being secretary was not something that ever was on my list of things I expected to do. In fact, it was something of a surprise when it came. I'm proud that it did. When my wife and I were together and I was taking the oath, I said, honey, in your wildest dreams, did you ever imagine that I would be the Secretary of Transportation of North Carolina? And she said, honey, you're not even in my wildest dreams. So that's the sort of attitude that I have to live with on a daily basis. I earn it and I treasure it. We have in common a birthday this year in the sense that it's a quarter century at a time. We, the State Department of Transportation, are 100 years old this year. In 1915, the State Highway Commission was created, and shortly thereafter, the state decided that it was time to get out of the mud, and in particular, and the focus on creating farm to market roads to be able to let farmers get their product out, produce and whatever else they could get off the land to get out and get it to market. Began the process of trying to develop a system of hard surface roads. So in 1921, there was a gas tax initiated. It was a penny a gallon. And we had, at that point, or as a result of that gas tax, we ended up with 8,000 miles of hard surface road in North Carolina. Today, the North Carolina Department of Transportation, not Highway Commission, that was an old name. Department of Transportation maintains a network of 80,000 miles of hard surface road, 80,000 miles of highway, and that's the second largest state-maintained system in the country. We are second to Texas. Texas has a lot of other roads, but North Carolina has no county roads. We have only city streets, town streets, or state highway maintained roads. And so your Department of Transportation has got a substantially larger task than a lot of other states. I want you to know that we believe that we are doing our best to try to deliver on the promise of the good road state. We continue to aspire to do better, and in this area, if you'll stand up here, Mike Pettijohn is our division engineer, and I think that Mike's a guy that you need to get to know, need to get to talk to, need to be sharing your mission or your expectations with, so he can help you make sure that we deliver it based on what we can do in Raleigh to support him. This is a group about which we care deeply in the Department of Transportation, because we know what the biggest industry is in North Carolina. If we didn't know or were confused, Commissioner Troxler would point it out to us quickly and in detail. But we don't need it to be pointed out, we know it. And if not the only mission of NCDOT, because we have many, certainly one of the main ones is to make sure that we're able to continue that commitment that we had as an organization when we started to have those roads to be able to be farm to market roads. The Commissioner has given me the privilege of serving on the North Carolina Manufactured Food Task Force, and this is a group whose mission is to try to make sure that we in North Carolina don't just accept the role of providing food for other people to be able to go ahead and turn into retail products or get to market. He wants to make sure, and all of us want to make sure, that we add just as much value to the products we have before we sell them, and make sure that North Carolina reaps the benefit of that that value creation. It's one thing to grow cotton and send it out of the state to have somebody else produce something out of it. It's a better thing to keep it in the state and sell it at retail. Sell it to somebody who's going to actually pay the maximum amount of money that we can get from the product. So that whole idea of the Manufactured Food Task Force is to make sure that we understand as transportation agency and all through the government, we understand how we can coordinate our investments to make sure we're delivering the kind of value it takes to make that happen. Transportation serves a critical role in connecting people to work, people to markets, people to education, people to recreational opportunities. We are a connecting agency, and we try to do the very best we can with the resources we have. The transportation was a major focus of the most recent session of the General Assembly. Governor McCrory had put forward a 25-year vision for what he saw as the future of transportation. And we end up with not only 80,000 miles of road to maintain, but 13,500 bridges across the state. And all of those things, unfortunately, we leave outdoors to have the weather work on. So we end up with a maintenance problem that is familiar to anybody that has to deal with a product or a service that they can't take in at night. The $3 to $4 million cost of building a new 2-lane road per mile is something that I want you to keep in mind as you hear the numbers I'm about to throw out. So in other words, 2-lane road, $3 to $4 million. Resurfacing a 2-lane road is about $200,000 a mile. So we build it, and then if you're going to put down that new layer of asphalt, it's $200,000 more a mile. The General Assembly took steps in this budget to better support both our construction side and our maintenance side. We ended up with $1.6 billion more over the next 10 years, so in other words, $160 million a year, for the combined, for construction projects. So $1.6 billion to add to our construction budget over the next 10 years, $500 million more for maintenance and operations over the next 2 years, so $250 million a year for that sort of resurfacing side of the house. The two most significant changes that the legislature made were stabilizing and modernizing our major income streams. We were dependent on a gas tax that was pegged to the wholesale cost of gasoline. And while I enjoyed the fact that gasoline went down $1 a year or so ago, a gallon, what that would have translated to if the legislature had not stepped in, would have been a $300 million per year decrease in our maintenance budget. It's a good thing to pay less for gasoline. It's a better thing not to have to be tearing your car up trying to get over the road that we can't maintain. We also found the legislature in this session was able to make up for 10 years of fixed fees at DMV and has allowed them to go up at a rate less than inflation would have been over that time. Plus, ending the transfer of more than $200 million annually that was coming out of the highway fund to support non-highway costs. All of that has meant the following kinds of changes. We'll have an additional $146 million for our bridge program over the next 2 years statewide, bringing the total for the bridge program for our next 2 fiscal years to more than $450 million. That translates in Division 11, the division Yadkin County's in, will receive an additional $5.8 million for the bridge program this year, bringing this region's total for bridges to $27.5 million for the fiscal year. For contract resurfacing, the thing I said is $200,000 a mile, we'll have an additional $147 million for the contract resurfacing over these next 2 years. And Division 11 will receive $4.6 million for contract resurfacing for this coming fiscal year, the current fiscal year, bringing the total to $26.8 million. Pavement preservation. Once you have put the road in place, one of the keys is to keep it from breaking up because it destroys the subsurface. If you don't protect that pavement, if you don't preserve that surface layer, you end up having to spend a whole lot of money to rebuild it. So pavement preservation, as opposed to just contract resurfacing, will get an additional $55 million over 2 years, and Division 11 will receive $4.5 million for pavement preservation in this fiscal year. Secondary road maintenance is an additional category, and secondary road maintenance is basically all the tasks that we have to carry out on the road, from weeds and litter, dead animal removal, all the tasks that have to be carried out, pothole patching. $57 million added over the next 2 years for secondary road maintenance. Division 11 will receive $3.4 million more in secondary road maintenance money for fiscal year 16, bringing the total to $23.3 million for the year. We continue to emphasize maintenance and preservation and rehabilitation to keep good roads and bridges in good condition longer. That's one of the keys to this, is to make sure that you don't put it off too long. You have to make sure you're getting the preservation work done before you get to the point where the system's breaking. Currently, about 5,300 or 40% of the state's bridges are either structurally deficient or functionally obsolete. Now let me define those terms for you. Structurally deficient means that it's no longer able to carry the original load. That's not unsafe. It is a bridge for which we have to reduce the allowed load across the bridge. Functionally obsolete means that based on its design, the approaches, the widths, things like that, it's no longer up to the standards that a modern bridge would be built to. Again, the bridges are not unsafe, but they may be functionally obsolete. The estimated cost to bring all the bridges that we have, to remove all of that deficiency, would be over $9 billion. Billion with a B. The bridge program money that was included in the budget will help make some headway in addressing the bridges. We estimate that we'll be able to replace or rehabilitate about 500 bridges using this funding over the next 2 years. But if you've got 13,500 to do and 5,300 of them need to be done, you can see that we have a bigger challenge than we've got a wallet. There's a new bridge over on Farmington Road near here, over Turner Creek, south of Huntsville. It's a recent example here in Yadkin County of efforts to improve the condition of the state's bridges. The bridge was nearly 50 years old, structurally deficient, and functionally obsolete, had weight limits installed. A new bridge was built to current design standards and fully capable of carrying the weight that's intended. We know that the condition of our rural roads and bridges is important to your folks, important to your livelihood, and we are doing our best to try to make sure we're delivering on the promise of that good road state. There's also a program called the State Transportation Improvement Program. It's adopted every 2 years, and that is a 10-year look into the future. So every 2 years we do a new one with a 10-year rolling projection. Additional money that's divided up in that is under the Strategic Transportation Initiative and splits money into different categories. There are statewide needs that we deal with, for example, the interstate. There are regional level impact facilities, and there are division level facilities. At your local level, your division level, that means $37 million allocated over the next 10 years for local projects. That's additional money that's going to be allocated based on the new changes that the General Assembly made. Right now, we are in the process of redoing our 10-year plan. It was approved, it was developed before the General Assembly completed its work, and so we didn't know about this additional money when we approved the previous plan. But we are working on the new 10-year plan, and that will be published in December to show what additional projects have been added. A few significant projects that are already in this area, already included in the plan, under that old plan. It's conversion of 601 in Yadkinville to what we call a synchronized street. And a synchronized street is an attempt both to be better at moving traffic and being safer. We have a 40% reduction in crashes on these streets compared to the previous design. And it's significant at some locations, as much as 75% reduction in crashes where we have safety issues. There's a new interchange that's going to be built on 421 between exits 257 and 259 on the west side of Yadkin. We're realigning the old US 421 with Spear Bridge Road, constructing a roundabout at the intersection of Shacktown Road. I don't know how many of you have had the pleasure of driving through a roundabout. I personally am a little bit of a fan of them because I've spent too much time sitting at a stoplight with nobody coming, and when it would be nice to go ahead and move ahead, or sometimes on these roads you're at a stop sign and you can't really see what's coming down the road. So I find these to be very useful. I don't know if we get unanimous support for that idea. There's also pavement rehabilitation going on in several stretches of I-77 in Yadkin County and a number of bridge replacements. We are starting the process of the next set of projects being submitted. And again, you should be in touch with Mike if you've got areas that you feel like need to be dealt with in that new construction project. I know we're not near the port here, but I want to point out that one of the things about North Carolina that I think we have failed to grasp, that we are now beginning to grasp, is the value of ports for our agricultural community. We are working on improvements to the port. Wilmington in particular is going to be able to compete with the newest ships, not the very largest, the giant ships, but certainly the ones that are being used for the new post-Panama Canal Enhancement Project. And those ships can carry North Carolina products around the world. We export more than $3 billion worth of agricultural products each year, and we want to encourage further expansion and economic contributions to our state from those exports. Last June, we broke ground on a new cold storage facility at the Port of Wilmington, which is expected to be operational in early 2016, and we believe will provide an opportunity for folks to save money that they would otherwise spend by shipping containers out of the Charleston or Norfolk ports. The federal government plays a role in our road system as well. We have a federal gas tax as well as a state gas tax. The problem we've got right now is that the federal government doesn't seem to be able to work on much more than a short-term agenda. The most recent extension of the highway authorization bill, which used to be a 5-year bill, they've just extended it for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. You know, what would be the point of that exercise? So the good news is that they didn't allow it to lapse, but 3 weeks. So we're hopeful. My brother would tell me that in complete ignorance of all past experience, or hope is the triumph of over experience, we are hopeful that they will finally get together and make progress on the federal bill. The good news is North Carolina has maintained a conservative fiscal approach to this. We wouldn't see any immediate shutdown of projects. We wouldn't go out and get the keys out of anybody's motor grader if they let it lapse, but this is an important issue that needs to be worked on. You also had at this most recent session of the General Assembly an important bill, the NC Farm Act of 2015. It did have some transportation matters dealt with. For one, it reduced the number of holidays with restricted travel for oversized road loads. There used to be 6, there are now only 3. Oversized loads are restricted only on Independence Day, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. Sunday travel restrictions were removed. There was an allowance for being able to get a special permit to allow Sunday travel. Now it's part of every overweight permit that gets issued unless it's specifically prohibited. Hay bales up to 12 feet wide can now be moved without a permit. It's not a weight exemption, just width, and previously the maximum width was 8 feet 6 inches. So that improvement in terms of efficiency. And there's specific language which allows left of center operations when the vehicle is wider than the travel lane. That's really only significant in terms of the legal issue to avoid automatic contributory negligence if there's a crash that happens. We also extended agriculture exemptions to other agriculture operations, including dairy and feed. I was glad to hear that there was reference to the State Highway Patrol, especially while I was Commissioner of DMV. I found that a lot of people had gotten so used to DMV being the enforcers of the motor carrier law that they thought we still were. We're not. It's a highway patrol function, and you certainly have gotten a briefing. That's a summary of all of the things that we have seen over the last year in the legislature and changes we've made. I have got to tell you that the distance between where we need to be and want to be and where we are is not as small as I would like it to be. We are working hard on making sure that we get better project delivery results, that we actually cut down on the time that projects are delayed to the extent we can. But my trip up here tonight reminded me that we don't control it. A lot of times weather's going to get in the way. We have done our best to try to make sure that we engage professionals in all aspects of transportation, and I would invite you to contact us through Mike or directly to me if there are issues you think need to be brought up. And I'll go through with that invitation by saying if there's anything anybody would like to ask about or comment on right now, here I am.